Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today, a short sequence of targeted shoulder poses that will help to improve your access to inversions such as headstand, forearm balance, and handstand. We'll be using 3 blocks: a belt, a blanket, a bolster, and a chair. Make sure you've got your mat up against the wall. We'll begin in Adho Mukha Virasana, a version of it, and we'll be placing 12 blocks under the hands. So a moment just to configure your blocks, judge the distance that you need to be with the blocks away from your knees. Make sure your wrists are shoulder width. You're prioritizing your hands, your palms being on the tops of the blocks, the fingers are spreading and overlapping the edges of the blocks. As you press your hands down, you're firming the elbows. They lift up. They perhaps get a little closer as well, particularly those of you with stiffer shoulders. The elbows will need to both lift and become more narrow in order to completely straighten. Just mindful of the elbow action for those of you that tend to hyperextend. So the intention there is just to keep the lines of the arms as straight as possible. So now that we've firmed the elbow region, consolidated the elbow region, we can bring our attention to the shoulders. And just notice, first of all, it might be the right, it might be the left, if there's a tendency for the shoulders to push inwards or upwards even towards the ears. And let's check first of all the left one, just loosening, relaxing the shoulder, let it broaden out away from the center line of the pose, back a bit away from the ears. Do that though without loosening the elbows. And then the right shoulder, again, just check for any bunching in towards the neck, up towards the ears. On both shoulders, just check that the deltoid muscles are turning outwards, the outer armpits turning downwards. And then again, just reassess, make sure that your elbows are firm, consciously lifting up, but your shoulders are relaxed. Keeping the shoulders relaxed, keeping the elbows firm. Let's then press our hands into the blocks and simultaneously our hips towards the heels, and feel how we can then lengthen through that shoulder area. That length won't come in a nice balanced, symmetrical way if we're gripping and holding onto the shoulders. Just let them loosen to the point where that region of the body can fully lengthen. The hands press down, your hip sockets press down, keeping your elbows lifting up, but lengthening through that shoulder region of the body. Notice the chest, it gets closer to the floor, but as a result of the upper arm bones descending, that region of the upper arm bone near the shoulder socket, it gets lower. All right, and then release. So similar action for the shoulders and the upper back. We'll turn around the other way. We're placing the blocks, they're still tall blocks, we place them against the wall, and we're going to need these blocks to be a stable support for our elbows. They'll be more stable if they're placed this way against the wall, as opposed to the more narrow edge of the block against the wall, which can make them a little bit wobbly. So tall blocks, but flat up against the wall. We want to place our elbows into the center of each block with our elbows shoulder width. And let's go there now. So the hands will be in Namaskar, prayer position. Shuffle the knees back so that your knees are sitting directly under your hips. You've got the outer hand in contact to the wall. And I'll just give you a few moments just to find that position. Make sure that the blocks are stable. So you've got your elbows right in the center of those blocks, securely on the blocks, and you're allowing your body weight to rest down onto the blocks. Don't confuse that with pressing the elbows in a muscular way down. It's more just that the weight of the body allows the elbow to make a firm contact with the block. Bring your attention to the outer wrist, on the little finger side of the wrist, and for many it tends to pull away from the wall, shrink away from the wall. Let's adjust the pose now so that the outer wrist presses more firmly into the wall, and then the little fingers can lift up. Notice as you do that, it gives you the ability to move the pelvis further back and away from the wall. And again, we get that sense of being able to lengthen, as we did in the previous pose, through the shoulder region, but importantly also that last bit of the upper back before the neck. So often if the outer wrist is moving away from the wall or shrinking away from the wall, we can get a little pushed, bunched in towards the wall, as if the head even gets a little bit cramped towards the wall. So wrists press into the wall, pelvis move back away from the wall. That last bit of the spine before the neck, it's moving with the pelvis away from the wall. We're lengthening through the shoulders. And our chest then, it can get closer to the floor, but it gets closer to the floor because the upper arm bones near the shoulders are letting go, releasing and descending. Don't confuse that with just dipping into the lower back. Keep the front of the pelvis and the back of the pelvis evenly moving away from the wall. All right, let's then come up. So with the hands together, it's more of a headstand action. And if we bring our hands apart, it starts to relate more towards our forearm balance, Pincha Mayurasana. To get there, we'll incorporate our third block. We'll be holding it here between the hands. So we've got the end of the block coming down into the heel of the hand. And just taking some care there to come into the pose. You can come in one elbow at a time and then place the block there between the hands. When your elbows feel stable, then you can walk the knees back so that the knees are under the hips. And just with the index finger bases there, squeeze them into the ends of the block. The outer wrist, again, just notice if it's pulling away from the wall or shrinking away from the wall. Instead, press it firmly into the wall. Notice how the block, it even slides up the wall a little as you do that. Pressing the outer wrist into the wall, then move the front and evenly the back of the pelvis further back in towards the center of the room. We get that same sense of lengthening through the shoulder region. That last bit of the upper back before the neck, it's moving away from the wall. There's more space then for the crown of the head. It's not jammed into the wall. And again, the chest, it gets closer to the floor, but not as a result of sinking in the lower back, not as a result of sinking in that region of the spine between the shoulder blades. The chest gets closer to the floor because we're allowing the shoulders to lengthen, release, and where the upper arm bone joins into the shoulder, that region of each arm is descending. Okay, and then release, we'll walk the knees closer into the wall to come out of the pose. And similar action, but let's use now the seat of the chair. So we'll gather our chair, have the front of the chair facing you, have the two front feet of the chair on the yoga mat so that the chair won't slide. Have a block nearby. We'll use it shortly. We'll begin though, as we did there initially, with the hands in the namaskar position. If you've got a hard floor surface, I didn't mention it with the block variation there, but you can always use the blanket for your knees if that's uncomfortable on your knees. So elbows near the edge of the seat of the chair, the hands are together. So not interlocking the fingers. If we interlock the fingers, often we invite tension into the shoulder region. Just having the hands together in that namaskar position allows the shoulders to release and let go. So a moment just to find the basic shape of the pose. The knees directly under the hips, the fingers pointing straight up. Now the inner wrist, and in this particular position it's the thumb side of the wrist, the inner wrist, contain it towards the outer wrist. Feel how the little fingers lift up a little as we do that. So inner wrist contained towards outer wrist. That same region of the arm that we've just looked at, both arms, where the upper arm bone joins the shoulder, descend towards the floor. Then the chest starts to sit lower, closer to the floor, but don't confuse that with the lower back sinking. To correct that tendency for the lower back to sink, move the back of the pelvis away from the spine. As you do that, the navel lifts up a little bit. So chest gets closer to the floor as the shoulders release and open. That region of the spine between the shoulder blades, it's moving with the pelvis away from the chair. The elbows, though, they stay anchored, firmly anchored onto the seat of the chair. Okay, and then release and come up again with the hands together. It has more of a relationship to our Shishasana, to our headstand. If we bring the hands apart by bringing a block between the hands, like so, it's going to relate a little bit more towards the Pincha Mayurasana. Let's head there now. So elbows onto the seat of the chair. Again, the side edges of the block into the palm of the hand. So the fingers are spreading and overlapping the edges of the block. A moment just to find the basic shape of the pose. Again, the inner wrist, thumb side contained towards the outer wrist. You'll feel the little finger side of the block lifting upwards towards the ceiling. The body weight resting down into the seat of the chair via the elbows. Don't confuse that with pushing the chair away with the elbows. So if we do that, we tense the shoulders, but if we just allow our weight to be supported by the chair, leaning into it with the elbows, the upper arm bones start to soften and we get that shoulder opening. We lengthen through the shoulders, we lengthen through that upper back area. Again, the back of the pelvis moves away from the spine so that we're not sinking into the lower back. We want the shoulders to accommodate this movement as much as possible. Make sure the index finger bases are squeezing into the block. That area of the spine between the shoulder blades moving away from the seat of the chair but keeping the elbows securely anchored down into the seat of the chair. Okay, and then release and come up. And let's take that one step closer to the shoulder action that is relevant to our forearm balance. We'll do it by taking our chair and tipping the chair so that the backrest of the chair comes towards the floor. That exposes all the 4 feet of the chair to the wall. We then slide the chair up so that all of those 4 feet are in contact with the wall. And then we just check that the seat of the chair is secure. As we press onto it, we'll use 2 blocks here. The first one, it's a flat block, and we're going to place it on the floor close to the edge of the seat of the chair. So we'll be with our hands reaching under there and holding that block. Don't allow the block to get pushed too far back towards the wall. So it's just a little bit beyond the edge of the chair here. We can easily reach it when we bring our hands into position. We'll then be wedging a second block between our upper back, near the base of the neck, but in the upper back, and the seat of the chair. It'll be wedged in this position. Just so that we can focus on generating upward lift, we'll have the block this way as opposed to this way. So not like this, we'll be placing the block like so against the seat of the chair. In order to position the block ourselves, helpful if someone can just come and place it there for you, but if you don't have that person to assist, then we can do it ourselves, but just making sure that the elbow position, it should start about the length of a block away from the seat of the chair. So we then, with both elbows, a yoga block's length away from the seat of the chair, we just hold with the fingertips the block up against the seat, and we can then lift the shoulders and the upper back to find where the block is, and then with our toes tucked under, just straighten the legs, walk in, and then one hand at a time we can slide them down into position and just holding that block there as we would do
ordinarily for our forearm balance, we've got the thumb and index finger at a right angle and gripping the block. The head is off the floor here. I'll give you a moment just to find that position. Make sure your fingers are spreading. Make sure your inner wrists are pressing firmly down. And walk in closer with your feet, so that, and as if pressing the yoga mat, stretching it away from the chair. Feel how that helps to give you a firmer contact with your back into the block. And that firmer contact generates upward lift. And if we coordinate it with pressing the wrist down as we press into the block and generate lift, feel how we can get that lift coming all the way into the biceps. So rather than the biceps sinking towards the elbows, they lift upwards towards the deltoids. Continuing with that, the deltoids lift upwards towards the sides of the ribs. That lift in the sides of the ribs, it continues to the pubic bone. The higher the heels lift, the higher we can lift the pubic bone away from the navel. Keep pressing the forearms down, keep leaning into the block to lift the pubic bone higher and higher. All right, and then we'll release, just bend the knees down. You can let the block drop towards the back of the head and then come off to the side. We'll go, if we just reverse back, we'll have space to do Virasana forwards for a moment, hips back to the heels. So that version of having the block in the back there with the chair, a really nice complementary action for improving your forearm balance and just ensuring that the shoulders are opening sufficiently in your forearm balance, Pincha Mayurasana. Let's look now at Shirshasana, headstand, and we'll use the 3 blocks. We'll make a tower with the blocks. The first block comes a little bit away from the wall and flat. We get our second block and we rest it onto that initial block. We then just adjust the distance of both those blocks, how far they are away from the wall, so that the block can then support this third block that we place like so. And we've just adjusted the distance away from the wall so that it's the middle of this top block that is being supported, and that means that it will be a little more balanced. We will be placing our head very lightly to the floor. You won't need to fold your mat up as you would normally do for a headstand in terms of padding for your head. It's just going to be a very light touch with the top of the head to the floor. Where you place your head is important here. You're not bringing the back of the skull all the way up to touch this bottom block. There'll be a little bit of a gap there. With your hands, maybe I'll just take this block off briefly to show it. So imagine this is the block that's to the floor. Your hands will be holding it and they'll be gripping it this way. The fingers coming around the far edge of the chair. You can even with your thumbs be pressing down onto the top of the block. Let's try. So let's just get that hand grip straight first of all. So holding both hands coming around the side edges of the block. The fingers themselves, they wrap around to the back edge of the block, and the thumbs can press down onto the top of the block. Make sure that your elbows are shoulder width, and then placing the top of your head to the floor, lift your hips up, walk in. Just take some time to make sure that the contact of the block is right in the center of the body where the spine is. It shouldn't be a little off to the right or the left. And it's a shoulder opening variation here, so we want to make sure that we're not just sinking heavily onto the top of the head. Ideally just a very light contact there with the top of the head. Something that can help there is if the index finger bases are squeezing into the block. Notice how that helps to contain a little bit the elbows. If the elbows are splaying wide, we're more inclined to sink onto the head and compress the neck. But don't stop at just at the index finger bases. It's also the center of the palm. Squeeze into the side edges of the block. And building still further, the index finger bases, the center of the palm, but also the center of the heel of the hand. Squeeze into the side edges of the block. Feel how that contains the elbow, and maintaining all of those actions, press the outer wrists down, and with the thumbs, press the block into the floor, and feel how that helps to generate that lift up through the area of the spine between the shoulder blades. We've got the block there supporting and maximizing that lift there. So it's a lift in the spine, but it's also in the arms and the shoulders themselves. Again, so that the biceps muscles are lifting up, not dropping down into the elbows. The deltoid muscles lifting up, the sides of the ribs lifting up, the pubic bone lifting up. Just check it again, just a light contact with the top of the head to the floor. Okay, and then we'll release down, knees back to the floor, and reverse back so that your arms can extend. Forwards there, Ardha Mukha Virasana. We're heading next to a reclining version of our handstand. So we want to make sure that we have a nice integrated length in the arms, so as if the arms start from the sides of the waist and continue from there towards the fingers. Alright, so our last variation, and then ideally you can continue on with some of your inversions beyond this class. But we'll have a look at handstand. At handstand. Ardha Mukha Vrikshasana. We'll use a threefold blanket for placing under our buttocks, and we can measure where that blanket needs to be by sitting in Dandasana, feet to the wall, taking note of where the buttocks are, and then placing the threefold blanket into that section of the mat. We'll be lying back with two blocks, both of them on their side edges. One will be for your head. We place that closer to the end of the mat. The other block will be in the thoracic spine, dorsal spine area. You will have the opportunity to adjust those blocks when you're lying back in position, but I can sort of guess that pretty much so that they're more or less in the right spot, and then it's just a matter of refining rather than needing to make big adjustments. Let's head there now. Make sure you've got your belt, make sure that you've got room to bring your arms back over the head. You can either have your arms coming directly to the floor. Sometimes actually it's better to just take that aspect of the pose away, so that because often if we're seeking the floor with the hands, it just lets everything go loose, and it's very counterproductive in terms of the shoulder opening that we're looking to get today. So bolster, rolled blanket, folded blanket, or the floor for those of you with more mobility, it can just be more of a guide that we can then work off, being active as opposed to just letting everything sink and relax back into it. So for today we can use the bolster. It's not compulsory. You can use more height than that if you've got stiffer shoulders. You can use less height if necessary for more open shoulders. Let's have the feet hip width apart, and just a few moments now to lie yourself back. So that initial block that we encounter, it shouldn't come as high as the neck. So literally in that bit of the spine that we've been working with there in the dorsal spine, the head block, make sure your skull is right in the center of it, literally. Particularly once we're bringing the arms over, we don't want the right side or the left side of the block to be too far across to the side. If it does, it might obstruct the arms. The bolster support, you can just reach back and make sure that it's not too close to the elbows, not too far away. And let's use the belt. We'll use it in two ways. Initially adjusting the buckle of the belt so that it keeps your wrists shoulder width. And we'll be placing the belt around both wrists, and then once you've done that, bring your arms towards the vertical position, have your palms facing the wall. So possible to have the palms facing one another, but we're consciously having the arms turned so that the palms are facing the wall. And
as a starting point, lift the belt as high as possible. So notice when we do that, the hands lift up, of course the belt lifts up, but feel it specifically in the biceps region. So we've already looked at it in some of the other poses, lifting from the opposite direction. Here we want to prevent the biceps from sinking to the shoulders, lift the biceps up with the palms, with the belt. But then press out into the belt, and notice how when you do that, you're able to completely tighten the triceps muscles. So get a real clear comparison there. The biceps lifting, the triceps firming, drawing in towards the bone, and then keeping both of those qualities as we slowly start to bring the arms back and over the head and into the support that you have there, and feel the reason why we have that support. So if we just allow the hands to sink down into the floor, often it means that the elbows loosen and we lose the connection of the arms through the shoulder area into the upper body. So we're just using that support as a very light guide, just a very light touch there, making sure that the arms are pressing out into the belt so that the triceps are firm, so that the biceps are lengthening still away from the chest. Feel the connection, the palms and the belt and the biceps and the armpits moving away from the body. It's a really good variation for encouraging length in the body from the feet to the fingertips. Let's then raise the arms back up, and let's then adjust the buckle so that the buckle is making as large a loop as we can possibly make with the belt. So just removing the shoulder width loop and replacing it with a large loop with the belt. And then it's a subtle difference, but it will make a difference. Rather than looping the belt around the wrists, we're just going to grab hold of the belt with both hands, making fists in order to grab the belt. And so we grip hard, firmly, with the fists on the belt, and it's as if we're stretching the yoga belt, as if we're trying to rip apart the yoga belt. Hard to overwork that action. It's a really strong action. Hold firm with the hands, but as if you're trying to stretch, break apart the belt. Notice we can still work with those same actions, the biceps lifting up away from the shoulders and the triceps firm. The triceps are firm as a result of that action, as if stretching the yoga belt. Without losing that action, start to slowly bring the arms back and over the head. So lengthening with the biceps outwards away from the body, but as if stretching the yoga belt, and that keeps the triceps firm. You might find that it's a little bit more of a contained action. We don't get quite the same length perhaps from the feet into the fists, but the shoulder socket, it just feels a little bit more pulled back into the body, and often that can mean that the hands will more naturally just sit that little bit lower. So different from body to body, just feel which one of the variations suits your pose more naturally, be it if you're looking for the length or that shoulder opening to get the hands to come lower, but without collapsing and sinking the shoulders. Let's then raise the arms back up. And okay, so shoulders are nice and open now and ready for a session of inversions of your choosing. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.